Summer was coming to an end, but even still, tourists flocked to the island to ride the famous engines. Because of all the business, the stations began to offer more services to keep the guests happy while they waited for a train to arrive. Some opened gift shops to sell souvenirs. Others opened little cafes where passengers could buy tea and cakes. Toryrek had the most unique idea. The retired station master had set up a small model train layout in the waiting room. Children and adults alike enjoyed seeing the small trains puffing through the miniature countryside. Even the engines on the branch enjoyed it, as they could sit and marvel at the model engines pulling trains just like them through the station window. Everyone loved the model railway. Well, almost everyone.
I don't get what's so special about that silly little layout,
Daisy grouched to Toby, who was resting nearby.
I mean, it's hardly anything grand or impressive like a stunning, highly sprung diesel rail car like me.
Toby just laughed.
'Cause it's fun, Daisy. You know, making model sets like that is not easy. I mean, the only television series that told our stories used models, and all those had to be made by hand.
Ew, don't remind me of that. The sets were so bland and looked so fake. Even the model people looked horrible. The only thing that looked good were the smelly trucks and coaches, while all our models looked dreadful. My model looks especially silly. I mean, I look terrible with Boko's wheels under me. Hardly highly sprung if I'm rolling along a layout looking like some filthy common goods diesel. And my goodness, the amount of makeup on my model's face had me look like some dolled-up damsel, as if you couldn't tell I'm a lady in the first place.
Toby didn't say anything. He just grinned at Daisy.
Now, if they wanted to do this island justice, they'd have filmed the television show right here and we could just recreate the stories written about us. It's called acting after all, and not to toot my own horn, I'm one of the best.
Oh, is that so, Daisy? Then I suppose if you were to recreate Bullseye's, you'd just be pretending to be scared of Champion?
Daisy huffed and flounced away. Later, she was resting on the siding when Thomas came up. He didn't pay Daisy much mind as he began to look at the model railway through the window, watching for a small tank engine pulling some coaches on it.
Oh dear, am I the only sane engine left on this railway?
What's wrong now, Daisy? Did someone ask what a coach is doing moving with no engine? Or did a little dust get on you?
I don't get what you like about that silly little layout, Thomas. It's just a children's toy after all. We engines have more important things to worry about than watching toys move around on some fake setting. And honestly, what's the point of putting all the effort into something like that? I know people need hobbies, but playing with toys, even when they're full-grown adults, is just ridiculous.
The Reverend had his own model layouts. Did you think he was silly?
Well, that's different. He was a reverend, so he hardly had much work to do anyway most of the week, except on Sundays.
The old station master was just walking up the platform with some model railway boxes under his arm and had heard everything.
I think I know why you're upset, Daisy. It's because there isn't a rail car like you in my layout. Perhaps I should see if the shop has some in stock.
I think that's a splendid idea, sir. I should have known. Oh, that was the reason Daisy was in a mood.
Before Daisy could snap a response, Thomas's guard blew his whistle and he puffed away.
Me on a model railway? As if I would entertain the idea.
That evening, the temperature dropped, and a thick wave of mist rolled in. Thomas and Percy were called away to help at Knapford Harbor to clear up a backlog of trucks caused by the weather. and Toby was working up at the quarry with Mavis. This left Daisy to handle the evening runs. She worked hard, but it was late when she was able to return to the sheds at Torrywreck. Her driver parked her inside and left. Daisy looked over at the station. Through the mist, she could barely see the layout. A small model train pulling lighted coaches passed by the window and then disappeared out of sight.
Ridiculous rubbish.
Soon she closed her eyes and drifted to sleep, unhappily so as the mist chilled her frames. Then Daisy suddenly felt herself moving. She woke with a start and suddenly realized she had no driver in her cab. She crept out of the shed and onto the main branch line.
Oh goodness, someone help!
But the station was dark, not a soul to be seen. Daisy felt herself suddenly gather speed. She rounded a corner and disappeared down a long, dark tunnel, where one hadn't been before. Down into the darkness she plunged, speeding along at the same steady pace as if she were running normally. The tunnel seemed to go on for miles before ending. Daisy barreled out into the open and down a misty country track. She looked around, peering through the fog. Nothing felt familiar. Nothing even looked familiar. She rounded a bend and saw a massive cliff to her right. It was so deep and vast she couldn't see the bottom. It was like looking down a deep, dark mine shaft.
Goodness me, where am I?
Up ahead, Daisy saw a small crossing with the gates already open. A car was stopped at them. This would have been comforting to the frightened rail car, if not for the fact that the road itself crossed the rails and disappeared over the cliff face. It was a road that went nowhere, and yet a car was stopped at the gates as if waiting for the train to pass so the driver could continue his travels. She rattled through the crossing and raced on. Up ahead, a station could be seen, and people could be seen standing on the platform. Daisy felt greatly relieved.
Thank goodness! Help me! Someone stop! Stop!
The words died on her lips as she rolled closer. The station was filled with what had looked like people, but up close, Daisy saw they weren't. They looked like mannequins, fake people clothing stores put up in their front windows. However, they looked nothing like people. Hastily smeared paint glistened on their bodies, and all were posed as if they were waiting for a train. What sent shivers down Daisy's roof, however, were the faces of the passengers. Or rather, the lack of a face. All the passengers were faceless, devoid of anything such as eyes or mouths, smooth and flat like an egg.
Horrors!
Cried Daisy, and she raced out of the station. Past the station, Daisy rolled into a goods yard. In the foggy distance, she saw lights coming around the bend. They flashed in the night, lights coming from the coach windows. As she drew nearer, Daisy could make out the color of the engine approaching her. It was a small blue tank engine, and she knew only one blue tank engine who pulled coaches.
Thomas, please help!
The engine was blue and pulling coaches, but it wasn't Thomas. It was faceless and silent as it rolled along, the coach compartments alight but with no one on board. It rushed past Daisy and was gone into the night. It was then Daisy felt a wave of confusion hit her. She'd passed by steam engines before, but this steam engine had not sounded right. No chuffing, no puffing, not even a whistle or any of that awful clanking sound steam engines made. It had been silent, save for the clattering of its wheels on the tracks.
I must be going mad! I must be!
She raced onwards until she rounded a bend and dove into another dark tunnel. She'd only just entered when she felt her wheels roll over something.
Points? Were those points?
It was unmistakable. Those were points. Daisy had just realized this and was about to wonder what points were doing inside a tunnel of all places, when suddenly she rolled over another set of points and violently swerved to the right. She screamed in terror, fearing she was going to hit the edge of the tunnel wall. Only there was none. Daisy rolled into an unfamiliar area. All around her, everything was flat. She could finally see the tracks running alongside her, as well as some coaches and trucks sitting around. She also noticed that something had happened to the tracks below her. The sleepers were resting on nothing but smooth ground, but it wasn't like the concrete floors at the works, but something else. Soon, a pair of buffers appeared out of the gloom. Daisy closed her eyes tight, feeling that she was going to keep rolling until she crashed. But then, suddenly, and slowly, Daisy felt her wheels slow down. She rolled along before coming to a stop at the buffers.
Oh, finally. Stopped at last.
But the relief didn't last long. Before she could catch her breath, a harsh light shined down upon her. Daisy blinked in surprise, completely caught off guard. Then, from the light, came two massive hands. They slowly descended down towards her, fingers spread open to grab her. Daisy had enough. She closed her eyes and screamed the moment the giant's fingers grabbed onto her side.
No! Someone! Anyone! Help me!
Daisy? Daisy, wake up!
Daisy shot awake with a start. She looked around. It was morning. She was back in her shed. Her driver was stood in front of her, and she could feel the cleaners on her side cleaning her windows. She sighed with relief.
Oh, thank goodness. Oh.
Is something the matter, Daisy? Sounded like you had a nightmare or something.
Maybe.
Her driver just nodded and gave her buffer a pat.
Well, it's all over now. A good smooth passenger run will do you good. Oh, but we do need to take the milk today.
Daisy shuddered. She wasn't as opposed to the job as she used to be, but she secretly wished she didn't have to. After the cleaners had left, Daisy's driver brought her to the platform and quickly went to get the morning paper. As she was waiting, the old station master came up from the car park. In his hands, he held a model train box. He smiled.
Look, Daisy, I just got this from the model shop.
He held up the box and Daisy gulped. It was a model rail car that looked similar to her.
I think it'll look wonderful on the layout, don't you?
Oh, very nice, dear.
Daisy said hastily as her driver boarded her cab.
Now I must be going. The milk won't collect itself.
And she rumbled away. Daisy doesn't find the layout in the station silly anymore. In fact, she hardly talks about it. The branch line engines aren't sure what made her change her tone. But we know, don't we?